Welcome, Professor Rao, and thanks a lot for giving me opportunity to interview you, sir, today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Professor Rao, I will be interacting with you in your three capacities, sir. One, you are Professor par excellence, and you are a researcher, Professor IIT Bombay also, and another designation as Director of IIT Delhi, Administrator, and third is related to your research and patent experience. So I'll be interacting you in these three main domains, sir. So my first, I have made some kind of homework, sir, before coming to the interview related to your profile. And normally my first question is related to the personality itself. So Professor Rao, you started your journey from a very small place, Kolhapur, then to IIT Bombay as faculty, and then IIT Delhi as a director. So I want you to tell us briefly about your this journey, sir.
So I come from a small, I would call a village. It's about when I was growing up, there were about 5,000 people. So it's a small town kind of a thing. Kolhapur, it is in Telangana state in Mahabubnagar district, one of the very backward regions of Telangana. And I studied in Telugu medium because in my village, the only school that was available was up to 12th, and it was all in Telugu medium. In those days, I graduated, in the 70s. It was always, the Telugu medium kind of a thing in those villages. Now there are English medium schools even in those places. And now they even have degree colleges. But at that time, it was always Telugu medium and until 12th. So I studied there with whatever was available. We did not have any teachers because in a small remote village, nobody would want to come and teach. Anybody who comes, it is a government college. Anybody who gets a posting there would come there and keep trying for a transfer. So that is how the entire thing was. So we hardly had any regular teachers for a longer period of time. So it was tough, but I think we made use of whatever was the best that was available at that time. And like any graduate or any student in those days, our goal was always to crack the local examination. There used to be MSET exam in Telangana. So we do the 12th, and then the MSET is in Telugu medium, so we could take that exam, seek admission in a local college in Telangana. And so until my BTech, there was nothing much to talk about. I was a good student. I was always, in the top few in the class, in any class that I went to. And and after my BTech, I think I then realized that that is when I came to know about IITs, and I wanted to go to IITs. That my aspiration for getting into IIT at that time, for me coming from my lower middle class kind of a background, for a village sort of a background, I think getting a government job was the ultimate thing. There was no other ambition, no other goal in life. You get a degree and get a job and live happily. That was how it used to be always. And so I joined IIT Bombay and for my master's MTech in microelectronics. And that is when I now started to think differently. And so my ambitions also grew. And I also became aspirational because I could see that there were other students in the class. I could also benchmark myself with the rest of the students who came from all over the country in my class at that time. And I could see that I'm not bad. I'm good. And then I thought, why not aspire for something bigger? And then after my MTech, I went abroad to Germany for a PhD. And after my PhD, I had a very quick PhD. I could finish my PhD in Germany in about 2 years' time. And so after my quick PhD in Germany, my professor also was very happy in Germany. So he recommended me to University of California in Los Angeles for a postdoctoral position. So I went to UCLA. I spent a couple of years there. And that is when IIT Bombay, because that was my alma mater, and my professors there were also very happy with me. So I was offered a position to come and join as a faculty member. And so I moved back to India in 1998, August 1998. And that is how I, So after going through the whole world, I came back and joined IIT Bombay, and that is how my career in IIT Bombay started. So starting from a remote village like Kolhapur to IIT Bombay, and then to Germany and US, and coming back. But I think my life changed after I went to IIT Bombay. If I had not done that, if I had not gone to an IIT, I don't think I would have really even known what I can do, what my potential is. I would have remained, I would have worked, found a job eventually. So I would have been there somewhere. But the turning point for my career came when I joined IIT Bombay. That's why when I tell students, I also tell them, come to IITs. You might want to go abroad, you might want to do anything, but see what IITs are, and go after you come to IIT. You can go abroad, but I think come to IITs once, spend some time, and because that will give you a platform. Because IITs, at the end of the day, all the brightest minds come there. So in the class, you get to see, some of the most brilliant people, and you know where you stand when you compare yourself with them. You know where you stand, and that gives you confidence. And in some cases, you might lose confidence, which also can happen in some cases. But in my case, I became more confident after I went to IIT Bombay. And because I could see that I am no less compared to anybody else, my English and all that, I got introduced to English after my 12th standard, because English was for us was a third language. But once I went to IIT Bombay, it was all fine. I thought, I can overcome whatever limitations I had, and I could, aspire for bigger things in life. I think it's very important.
Right, sir. So you truly said, Professor Rao, that once you join IITs, your imaginations are fired, and you sit with the best brain in the country, and then you realize that, okay, I can do better, and that is how it all goes. Professor Rao, my next question to you is, you also represent IIT Delhi as director, and IIT Delhi recently has been ranked among top colleges in the world QS ranking also, which I can see on the website also. Sir, this is also Institute of Eminence. I want to ask you, sir, how IIT Delhi is different from rest of the IITs in the country?
IIT Delhi, when in fact, my reason for coming to this position is also because of my frustration. So I was a faculty member at IIT Bombay before I came here for something like 16 years. And I realized that IITs can do better. And in fact, even my own career as a IIT faculty member, usually what happens is you do a postdoc somewhere, and you come back to the country with lots of problems, because the research problems, what you were working in those countries, and you tend to continue on those same problems. Correct. That is what I also did. I mean, 1998, when I joined, till about 2004, 2005, I basically continued on whatever I was working in the US. And most of those problems in the US were given by the corporates there. These were all problems given by the large semiconductor industries. And so I could carry those problems back to IIT Bombay, and I could again get into collaborations with the same companies in the US. So my first 6 years or 7 years, I was basically working on technologies which were what I was doing in the US. But then, it was fine. I could do very well. I could patent, I could transfer technologies, licenses. I could do all of that. And all of that was fine. I also got many recognitions in the country as a part of that. I got Swarna Jayanti Fellowship in 2004, and I even got the Bhatnagar Award in 2005. All that, but the research was basically, what I started in the US and came back and continued. So that was how it was. But at some point in time, around 2004, 2005, I started asking myself the question, if I wanted to work on the same problems which people in the US are working, then why did I even come back to India? I could have as well done that work by being in the US. It's a much better ecosystem for research and technologies and all that. There was no need for me to come back to India and work on the problems of these multinational companies in the US. So that is when I started to feel a little bit restless. And I thought, having come back now, I should do something. I should choose problems more carefully. I should look for problems where, I can find a solution to the local issues. and I should look at issues around me in the country, and can I develop a technological solution to some of the problems that people are facing in the country. So that is when I very consciously started to look at research problems which have a relevance for the country. And that is when I started to focus more and more on connecting with let's say medical hospitals, or connecting with our strategic agencies like DRDO and others, connecting with local industries. So I started to focus on the local problems. One of the very first projects we took up was a cardiac diagnostic kind of a system. We said, can we develop a 100 rupee test for cardiac diagnosis? And then my next problem I chose was can we develop a low-cost explosive detector to prevent, the terrorist attacks or bomb blasts? So can you develop a electronic nose platform, an e-sniff kind of a thing, a nano sniffer, which can sniff explosives like a sniffer dog would do. The sniffer dogs are used all over the world. So can we develop a sniffing platform which is very similar to what a sniffer dog would do? So we started to focus on some of those problems where we looked at what can be done to develop those platforms and to use them for Indian applications. So these were the problems. These were very interesting and very important problems. So I started developing them, and then I started two companies as a result of these problems I chose. I mean, my second project company was on agricultural sensors. So I also got interested in agriculture because precision agriculture is very important for India. So my journey into entrepreneurship, startups, patenting, all started with the identification of problems in the country which require a solution. So that was how, but these problems were also very challenging problems. When I am talking of, let us say, a cardiac diagnostic system, a similar system doesn't exist, or at least did not exist anywhere in the world. And even now, a explosive detector, which is handheld, which is like a sniffer, which can replace a sniffer dog, doesn't exist anywhere. Therefore, I chose problems which have a relevance for the country, but these are global problems too. If I can solve them in India, there is a huge market for these. But I can also now sell them all over the world, and then so choosing the right kind of a problem was very important for me, because that problem needs to be challenging on a global scale, but should have a relevance in the country. And if you develop a cardiac diagnosis, for example, system, every fourth death in the country occurs because of a heart attack. And if you have a very simple test which can detect cardiac markers and advise you or advise the person on whether there is going to be any cardiac problem, then you can basically prevent deaths in the country. And a 100 rupee test, anywhere in the world will be seen as such an important technology. So I chose those problems which had that relevance. But many of these problems did not come from library. So I did not go to library, search for a problem and work on that. I basically got these problems by interacting with my colleagues at IIT Bombay. My research became very multidisciplinary. I interacted with medical hospitals, medical doctors. I interacted with strategic agencies. I interacted with industries. I interacted with even the farmers, for example, because to understand, what are the issues with the farmers. So that is how I started choosing problems, and then my research became much more interesting. And all these problems, if you can write lots of papers. It is not that these are all problems where you can only develop a prototype and you cannot write papers. In academic system, it won't work. If you choose a problem where I cannot do research, I cannot write papers in top journals in the world, my PhD students cannot graduate, and there is no satisfaction. There is a peer kind of a problem, because nobody will see you as a great researcher if you're not able to write those good papers. But I think research should not end only as publications. Yes. I might have hundreds of papers, but if out of those hundreds of papers nothing came out as a solution to anything, and if nobody can use those things in the society, at least to me as an engineer, I would feel a bit disappointed with that. So I chose problems where I can write papers in the world's top journals. I can also guide PhD students on those problems. they also can find careers and build their careers. But at the end of the day, there is a system to solve a problem in the society. So that is
That's good.
how I started
That's
managing my research and to multiple startups, multiple patents, high quality research publications, many PhD students. I think,
that's
I keep telling people that choice of the problem is what decides,
everything.
a good researcher from a not so good researcher. So that is very important.
That's right. Professor Rao, my next question, I think partially you have answered, sir. My next question was like you are one of the very few researchers in our country who has 45 patents in your name, and largely maximum of them are commercially viable and they are being used commercially. So the reason for that success is the identification of the problem itself, or sir, your outreach to the industries and, as you said, even farmers, and at the cost of your even discomfort, which majority of the faculty may not be ready to do that. So what is the main reason, professor, that your majority of the patents are commercially relevant and viable? What is the reason for that?
I think, just to complete your previous question too. So I strongly believe that R&D does not mean publishing papers alone. R&D to me meant relevance. Right. The R to me stands for relevance, and the D for me stands for delivery. So when I say R&D, for me it's relevance and delivery. Both are interlinked. If you're developing a solution to a problem which doesn't even exist in the society, it is a solution looking for a problem. Right. Nothing much can come out of that. But if you have a solution to a problem in the society, then the delivery also becomes important. Somebody will take your technology and take it forward to solve it. So therefore, to me, that relevance and delivery part of it is very important. And that is what I strongly believe in. At IIT Delhi, if you see in the last 4.5 years, what we have done, this is basically what I have done. Whatever individually I have gone through as a researcher is what I tried to do at the institutional level. Okay. And that was my frustration before in IITs, because everybody, you see great researchers show a large list of publications, but if you look at what has come out of it, nothing much. So the people are happy just writing papers. And I felt that of course we should write good papers, we should generate knowledge, all that is fine, but our motto in life should not be just writing papers. Something more needs to come out. So at IIT Delhi, we one thing which I did very consciously was to connect with institutions around us. With All India Institute of Medical Sciences, we started over 100 new projects in the last few years. With Indian Council for Medical Research, we started large number of projects. With Indian Council for Agricultural Research and their laboratories, we started many projects. So that is when the relevance comes. Because if you talk to an AIIMS doctor is not going to be interested in a blue sky research. Some of them may be, which is okay, nothing wrong in that, but many of them are facing so many problems in their day-to-day life. They want engineers to find solutions to them. Yep. So when you interact with them, or when you interact with the scientists in the agricultural space, they also have very interesting problems which the farmers are facing. So one thing which is very different at IIT Delhi now is we are very well connected with all the stakeholders, and IIT Delhi also has an excellent ecosystem for entrepreneurship. Now every second student on the campus here wants to become an entrepreneur. In fact, half of the unicorns, the $1 billion startups, have come out of this IIT Delhi alumni alone in the country or among the Indians. So I think IIT Delhi has that ecosystem. So if we can expose faculty and students to more real world problems, and then, they can pick up the right problem, develop a solution, and take it to the society to start. So that is what we have done at IIT Delhi in the last few years, and it is working wonders now. So one of the things which I also did was, my research was always inherently very multidisciplinary. Why it became multidisciplinary? Because I always put the problem first. If you put the problem first, if my problem is to, let us say, double the farmer's income, what discipline does it belong to? It doesn't belong to any discipline. It inherently becomes multidisciplinary. So that is when you are trying to find a solution. So at IIT Delhi, for example, we started a scheme about 3.5 years ago after I joined, where we said faculty interdisciplinary research program. I said if a faculty member from one department wants to work with another department, faculty member, institute will seed support them. Institute will provide them a seed grant, and using that seed grant, they can work together. And then after a couple of years of working together, they can go out and get external support. So we made it mandatory that after 2 years of using the institute seed grant, you have to go out and get external support. And we started about 50 projects in the institute. Now, all of them have gone out and got almost like 100 crores back to the institute. I think, so that is where the things are looking very different now. People are getting connected with each other. People are getting connected to, the stakeholders who have real world problems, which they are trying to deal with. So, IIT faculty working with all these stakeholders, working on real world problems, developing solutions, and using startup as a medium to put it out. I think, in the process, even the patents have come out now. IIT Delhi in 2016, when I joined, filed about 15 patents in that year. Now in 2019, we have filed 153 patents. So from something like 15, 16 patents to 153 patents in 2006 to 2019 is simply because, we are now working on real problems, and the entrepreneurship has become so important, and people, unless you patent something, unless you protect the IP, nothing else will happen. I mean, there is no startup if you don't even have a IP registered on your name.
Right,
so
right.
I think that is how the transformation has been, and that is how things are looking pretty good.
Right.
This is what I thought IIT should be doing. Some section of faculty must do basic research. Okay. Today's basic research becomes tomorrow's technology. If we cut down on the basic research, that is the feeder for technologies now. So therefore, we must work on basic research, but IITs kind of a places also have to develop technologies, need to solve problems. We are not a basic science kind of an institute. We are, after all, a technology and engineering institution. Right. So engineering is all about solving problems.
Right, sir. Professor Rao, we see in the top world universities also, like the professors are playing the role as the agent of entrepreneurial development. I mean, they have the best mind with them, and then they are sitting in the ecosystem like IITs. So do you really think, sir, that professors of the institutes like IITs can become the agent, which can create this entrepreneurship environment, and they can produce many entrepreneurs because they are connected with the industries also, and then they are sitting in that environment also. So do you think that can happen, sir? And if yes, how much that is happening in IIT Delhi?
That's a very good point. In fact, that is something very close to my heart, because when I joined IIT Delhi as a director, I already had 2 successful startups, which are running at IIT Bombay and which are selling products and all of that. I see that need for doing that, because what happens is in India, if you look at our entrepreneurship space, much of it is happening at the BTech level. Yeah. The BTech students are the ones who go out and do the entrepreneurship and all of that. What are the companies you can start with a BTech kind of a background? You can do e-commerce, you can do aggregation kind of a model. So all the companies that came out of IITs or these graduates were all more to do with the business model innovation. Much of it is basically the business model innovation. But with that is good. Whether you call about Flipkart or Snapdeal or Zomato or everything you talk about have all come out of these graduates, and everything is fine. But you need to also get into the technology space. I tell the entrepreneurs, if I want to start a company, for one Flipkart, there will be 10 companies copying the Flipkart model. Sure. The first guy who made it, great, it will become a unicorn, billionaire and all that. But then the second company, third company, fourth company, the value starts reducing, right? But whereas, think of starting therefore a Flipkart kind of a company, 10 people will copy it. Okay. Now, if I want to start a company to compete with Google, nobody even thinks of it, because Google is sitting on such a deep technology platform. To compete with Google, you cannot really, overnight go and build a team and start competing with Google. True. So I want to see more and more startups which have technology at the forefront, which have technology at their core, and that sort of a companies, which have the deep tech as at the core, is what we need to, put out from our institutions, particularly from institutions like IITs. Yes. That cannot happen only with a BTech kind of degree. Yes. That requires higher degree. You need to understand the technology. For example, if you want to start a company in quantum technology, I mean, with a BTech degree, you would only have scratched the surface. So you need to do a PhD in quantum technology to be able to identify the right problem and then go ahead and start a company. So I have been pushing all the students here, don't stop with only the BTech degree. Look for higher degrees. become good at one particular thing in your field of study, and then keep your eyes and ears open for the real problems where you can apply this technology and then solve a problem. And then, you can start those Google kind of companies, which is also what needs to happen in the country now. So at IIT Delhi, we did two things. We started a program called FIRE, FIRE, stands for Faculty Innovation and Research Driven Entrepreneurship. Faculty Innovation and Research Driven Entrepreneurship. Under that program, if a faculty member says, faculty members are all doing research. If a faculty member has found a solution to a problem, institute gives them grants to convert for the translation research so that they can build a prototype. Institute gives them leave, 1 year of sabbatical where all salary is paid and 2 years of leave without salary. So faculty members can take a 3-year leave from their job, and faculty members can get a grant from the institute. Within that time, along with their students who worked on that problem, can they start a company? Okay. So under the FIRE scheme, we are trying to convert faculty members into entrepreneurs. Okay. Why is it important? If when faculty members do that, then the PhD students will get excited. Because I have become an entrepreneur myself as a IIT faculty member, now I can see a whole chain of my PhD students who are also doing startups and who have that bent of mind now. Because I think that is how it needs to start. We need to, in this country particularly, push the faculty-led entrepreneurship, because these entrepreneurships will be, these enterprises will be more deep tech, because faculty members would have done research before they do anything like that. So therefore, they will have a strong technology component. And when they do that, then the PhD students would also follow suit. And that is how we go to that next level in terms of entrepreneurship ecosystem. We also started a second program called PhD Incubator. What is a PhD incubator? The capital P, capital H, capital D, and we called it Platform for Harnessing Deep Technologies. That is what we call the PhD entrepreneurship. My goal here is, anybody who has a technology idea, and that technology, if it can help solve a problem, then you become an entrepreneur in that PhD incubator, and you get a stipend, because I am targeting more and more PhDs to become entrepreneurs. Now, PhDs happens at a slightly later stage in the life. And once you graduate, there are pressures to get married, and then you get married, and your ability to take risk goes down. And as a result, now many of them tend to choose for a safer option and find a job kind of a thing. Yeah. But we said for any graduate who has a higher degrees in terms of their qualifications, and we have a technology idea, could even be a PhD. Now under the PhD incubator, they get a fellowship. Okay. They get a fellowship of almost like 75,000 rupees per month for a period of 18 months. And they also get again a grant. Okay. So using that fellowship, and we even provide them accommodation on the campus in a small flat where they can even live with their families. So we are doing it in our Sonipat campus. So now what else one can do? So now we're at a slightly later stage in life. You have an idea, which is all screened through all the processes and all that. Then we get that person to the campus. We give them accommodation. We give them lab space. We give them a fellowship. Right. And then we even connect them with the industries so that they can convert that idea, into a prototype and then make a company. So we want to see more and more such companies happening in the deep tech space from the PhD incubator. So which is again what we are trying to do now. And so therefore, I very strongly believe that faculty members doing entrepreneurship, PhD students are the deep tech entrepreneurship ideas is what the country needs to, in a way promote. And that is what we are trying to do at IIT Delhi. And I always say that, Saraswati and Lakshmi, the two goddesses we worship, Saraswati for education, Lakshmi for the wealth. Now we need to be able to see the two goddesses together. Yeah, I think that is very important, because, otherwise what happens is if you look at a typical Bollywood movie, when you look at a professor in a Bollywood movie, the professor is supposed to be very poor. You will see professors with a jula and then, with that kind of thing. You will never see in Indian, anywhere a rich professor. That's an oxymoron. I mean, there is nothing like a rich professor. A businessman will come out of a Mercedes Benz and all that, but a professor would never come out of a, would come out of a Maruti 800 and all of that. That is a cultural problem that we have now, because we are not willing to see, academics as rich people. And we have always kept the two things separate. But that needs to change. In my opinion, if you are pursuing Lakshmi through Saraswati, nothing should be wrong about it. The society should accept it. But pursuing Saraswati to Lakshmi is bad. But that model we have already enabled. Saraswati to Lakshmi, there are so many private colleges charging a capitation fee. You can get whatever degree you want right now. But the other process is what we should have encouraged. That is what we are trying to do. And we need to do that. Otherwise, in US, for example, a smart professor is what? In US, smartness is always associated with wealth. In the US, you will never say that guy is smart but poor. It doesn't work like that. The smart and wealth are all associated equally in a US kind of a system. In India, it doesn't work. I think these are the cultural changes that we need to change. So we need to promote entrepreneurship activities among our faculty members, among PhD students. I think that is very important. And I even recently wrote a kind of a concept paper for UGC so that this model can be implemented in the universities in the country. In many universities, it is still not allowed. Faculty members are not allowed to start companies. But we recently wrote a concept paper, and hopefully UGC will implement it across all the university system in the country.
Okay. Professor Rao, this is a great idea where you are trying to bring Saraswati and Lakshmi together, sir. But my question to you, sir, is that don't you find there is some kind of clash of interest here because the primary activity of any professor is research and teaching. So when we expect that entrepreneurship model professor will be working on, don't you find, sir, there will be some kind of compromise in his main domain of activities?
There should not be. Because when you do research, what is the outcome of research? Outcome of research, if you see as publications,
right, sir.
Right? That is what we have been doing all along. But if outcome of research is to solve a problem, right? You have found a solution to a problem. Let us say, I have a solution to detecting explosives, like what a sniffer dog would do. I have a e-nose kind of a platform. Now, what do I do next? After that, what do I do? In India, unfortunately, there are no manufacturing industries. There aren't even any high-tech industries in the country.
Right, sir.
Now I will have to wait for an industry to come forward, take my technology, and then put it out into the market. We have been waiting for 60 years in this country, to expecting industries to collaborate with academia, take our technologies, and put and give them to the society and all that. But nothing has happened. I think how many industries are collaborating with academia and to take their technologies and then make them available to people in the society. That model hasn't worked. So our only way this will work, the delivery part of it will work, is through the startups. Otherwise, India, remember, is also known to skip generations. When it comes to mobile phones, we skipped the landline generation completely and went to the mobile. And when it comes to even automobiles, for example, we have skipped almost the hybrid generation and directly switching over to the electric cars. And when it comes to the academia industry collaboration, I think we will skip that completely, because for 75 years we have tried that academy for whatever, since independence. For so many years we tried, to bring academia industry together. Hardly anything happened in this country. Now, what is the best way we have found? The best way is you do research, you start a company, and then you put it out into the market. So therefore, this model of switching the conventional academia industry collaborations and use startups as a medium to put out your technology into the society is a new model for Indian academic institutions. And this also can turn out to be a good financial model for the institutions. Imagine if a Google-like company comes out of IIT Delhi, IIT Delhi holding equity in that company. That's 5% in $1 billion company. We don't have to go back to government for any fund. Therefore, this is a model that we need to promote, and the conflict of interest is very important. So you need to have at IIT Delhi, we have a Senate approved policy for conflict of interest. And you need to trust the faculty members. I run 2 companies. I hold equity in those companies. I am chairman of the board of directors in some of those companies. I am director in some of those companies, but not a single rupee from that company comes to me. I don't take any money from the company. And that is a conflict of interest. If I am, as a professor, start a company and start getting paid from that company, then there can always be kind of issues in that. But you can hold equity in the company. And when the company is sold out, you make your money. But all of that is legal money. Everything is done through the IIT process. My interactions with my startups or all on paper, or all based on the policy that is in place between IIT and that company. So therefore, everything is transparent. Everybody knows what we are doing. As long as things are transparent, there is no problem. As long as you have a good policy for conflict of interest, everything is fine. So I think we need to do that process, and we need to sort out these problems so that it can happen more and more.
Yeah, just now you mentioned, Professor, like 50% of all unicorn companies in country were produced from IIT Delhi, and rightly said, had they started from the campus itself, you would not have required any finance from the government. That's true, sir. Professor, my next question to you is, can BTech, MTech, and PhD student initiate their own companies being in the campus as of now? Is that possible?
Yeah. So in fact, our big challenge in IITs right now is a second year student wanting to do a company, and in the process neglecting their studies, and failing in the program, but the company is doing very well. How do you deal with such student? So this is also a problem, and unfortunately, there will always be issues. And whatever you do, whether it is faculty starting companies or students starting companies, all these processes are enabled now, and they are enabled, but there are black spots here and there. But it's very important for all of us to identify those black spots and deal with them individually. Very often what happens in our systems is you find out of 50 such cases, there is one problem, and then we start making a new rule to ensure that that problem will not arise. And then we start tightening the rules so much that finally these 49 companies will close down. I think that is, we always make rules keeping that 1% in mind. And in the process, the 99% will suffer. So you need a lot of maturity as an academic leader when it comes to, there will always be black sheep in our system. There will always be some people who will try to exploit, some of these kind of situations, but we need to be careful. We need to ensure that they are individually punished for violating the rules. But in the process, we should not start making more and more rules to make life complicated for everybody. I think, but we deal with those cases. We have proper conflict of interest policies. We have proper resolution kind of, mechanisms, and all of that is taken care of. And there are no major challenges. And people, once once they realize that this is how it all needs to be done, I think everybody follows rules and things are all fine. Right?
Okay.
I think things are working fine, I think, as far as I can see.
Good. Professor, just now you mentioned that for 7 long years you were working on the problems given by corporates in USA, though you could get patented and you could even commercialize that, but that was not solving some real life problem in India. I want to bring you to your kind notice, sir, another issue which already you are aware, like when somebody joins PhD, his professor tells him to identify the research gap by picking up some top journals, research papers, identify the gap and work on that. Next couple of years of his PhD, he spends on working on those gaps. At the end, he ends up publishing some good journal papers also, sir, but he has not worked on any real life problem, because the way he identified the problem was only theoretical way, not to go to the outside world and find out the real problem. And eventually the patents, even if he comes out with some patent, they are not commercially viable. So what is your take on that, sir? That means I just want to bring to your kind notice this particular part, that how to identify the research problem. Can you please tell us something about that?
Now, what you said, the process of finding a problem, there is nothing wrong with that. Let me also be very clear. Some people should do that. I think you just go and find a nice problem which you are excited and publish some good paper. That is how the knowledge, the boundaries get pushed, and that is how the knowledge advances, and that is how you generate new knowledge. Which is, I have nothing wrong with that. But the problem arises when everybody starts doing the same. If out of let's say 600 faculty in IIT and out of some 3,000 PhD students in IIT, if all the 3,000 PhD students are finding their problems from the library, and then all of them are only writing papers, then when somebody asks you, you've been doing all this great research in the institute for so many years, so many papers, so many citations, so many patents, but what has happened after that? Now, when somebody asks that question, if you're not able to answer it, then I will be worried as a leader. So therefore, I think there has to be a nice proportion. I think not everybody, while some should do that, and that is good, advancing the knowledge without any personal motive attributed to that, which is good. I think some should do that. So but at least some section of our faculty and students need to find the real world problems and find solutions to them. And those are also the ones which are very satisfying. Now I have done both. I still work for corporates in America. I still have projects with them. I still file patents with them. I still write papers on those problems. I don't see anything wrong because there are all kinds of students you get. And I sometimes get a student who just wants to do theoretical work, doesn't want to go to the lab or do anything, which is fine. I think that is what the student wants to do, and I always try to provide a problem to the student in that area. But there are students who don't want to do that. They want to work on a real world problem, build something. So therefore, you get students of all types, all kinds of attitudes. So we need to cater to them. But the problem always is if you do only one type of things and not balance your research properly, and that balance is the key. And I think at least I have about 30% of my students working on problems given by, let's say, multinationals, and I have now at least 70% of my students or 60% of my students working on developing high technology solutions to problems. For example, solving the agricultural problem in India. I can tell you, you can spend your lifetime in solving that, and you can file an infinite number of patents and write large number of papers and all that, because these problems are so complex. Now, how do you, for example, can I develop a simple solution which a 10th class graduate or 10th class pass in a village use to measure, let's say, micro and macronutrients in the soil, or do the soil health monitoring? Now, to do the soil health monitoring and advise the farmer what is the fertilizer to use, or what does the soil require, I can tell you, there are no solutions for that. Even today, the soil is sent to the soil health laboratories, and it takes a long time, and nobody really trusts that process, and it's really not working. So can we develop simple low-cost solutions for soil health monitoring and move more towards precision agriculture, kind of technologies? And these kind of problems, you can do everything. You can do high-quality research, and if you develop a solution, so many farmers can benefit from that. Therefore, choosing the right kind of a problem is very important. Another way you can choose problems is, like I was mentioning, work with the strategic sector. Now, if you talk to DRDO, for example, DRDO is developing technologies in such a wide, varying, applications for the Army, Navy, and Air Force. And similarly, ISRO, for example, there are so many problems. So if you connect with ISRO, DRDO kind of agencies, or even DAE kind of agencies, they all have funding schemes, and their problems are always, something which will be useful in development of these technologies. So that is again another way you can find good problems, by interacting with scientists from ISRO, scientists from DRDO, scientists from even armed forces, and again, our scientists from DAE kind of organization. So that is another way you can find a good set of problems. Interactions with industries again. That is where industry academia collaborations will help, because they will give you the right set of problems. Or interacting with the other one of the four ways I always say to, or just observation in the society. If I am walking to my office, I see these huge lawns in IIT Delhi. How do you water them? We have sprinklers, and then you are basically sprinkling, and then the gardens are all maintained kind of a thing. But but the water is a huge scarcity in the country. Maintaining these gardens is a luxury for any institution in the country. How do you know what is the optimum water that you need to use for the garden? Or have you measured the soil moisture? By measuring the soil moisture, can you control the sprinkler? That as soon as the soil moisture is reached, which is 10% or 15% soil moisture, which is sufficient for that particular grass, can you shut off the sprinkler? That will require you to develop soil moisture sensors, which are very low cost, integrate them in the garden, and with that control your sprinkler, you would save so many liters of water. And that is what we need to do. Imagine the amount of water you can save in a garden in IIT Delhi, and imagine the used in golf courses to maintain their lawns, and places all over the country. And imagine the amount of water you will save in the process. So these are the problems you can identify through observation. because there are so many problems around us. And if you can deeply study them, understand them, and if you want to find a solution, that can again become another very interesting way to find problems. So I thought, so going to library, finding problems, writing papers is one way. But there are three other ways through which you can find problems. One is observing problems in the society. One is interacting with strategic agencies. One is interacting with the industries. I think those channels also need to be opened, and people need to work on those problems too. I think the diversity is important. I think when you do that, lots of interesting things will start happening in our academic institutions.
Professor Rao, when we see the projects being handled by the faculties of premium institutes like IIT, what we find is that the projects are largely taken from other government agencies like DRDO, ISRO, Department of Science and Technology, or large MNCs or large corporate houses. Professor Rao, we know that MSMEs in India, which give the employment to very large section of our society, they do not have R&D section. But we do not find here that professors of premium institutes providing consultancies or handling the projects of these small organizations. So where do you find gap, Professor, for that?
It's a very important problem. In fact, I realized this myself a few years ago. And so I think it needs to be addressed. It's very important. And, IIT Delhi, we have the Center for Rural Development and Technology, CRDT. And in the Center for Rural Development, there are at least 150 PhD students who are working on problems related to rural areas. Okay. That is one place where it happens. And another place is Department of Textile Engineering. For example, recently one of the faculty members gave me an example. There is also a program called RUTAG, Rural Technology and Applications Group, started by the Principal Scientific Advisor, the previous Principal Scientific Advisor, Dr. Chidambaram, where there are groups within IITs, RUTAG for rural applications, CRDT at IIT Delhi, and then there are other departments where we are very consciously looking for problems in those medium and small scale sectors. For example, one of the things recently that was brought to my notice was all the bead making, in Mathura and those regions, the malas, the bead making, all that one of the faculty members from IIT Delhi did was to automate the process, to improve their productivity. And until that time, in large number of villages around Mathura, their annual income or their monthly income from that process was about 3,000, 4,000 rupees. And because they were able to improve their productivity through automation of the whatever instruments they were using, they were making 11,000 and 12,000 rupees. So that is what we need to do. I think one of the challenges in doing that is we don't have a proper process in place to identify those requirements. It happens sometimes, because you have gone somewhere, somebody told you, and then you worked on that problem, but there is no established formal process for IITs to, identify such problems and then solve them. I think we need to create at the national level a crowdsourcing kind of a platform where such problems will be brought to the attention of good technologies and the good researchers in these institutions. And once it comes to somebody's notice, the solution can be found. But very often the solution is not found because people are not even aware of the problem. I think I see a need at the national level to connect more and more researchers in these institutions with the grassroots level, the workers who require that kind of automation solutions. It is happening, but it's happening at some scale. But I think it has to happen at a larger scale. And but that is where government agencies need to do that. There are ministries which are working with those medium and small scale industries. They need to launch initiatives. They need to launch programs. I think if such a platform is created, I can tell you there is a lot of interest now among the IIT faculty. Particularly, I see at IIT Delhi many people excited with those kind of opportunities, to solve those problems, because it is very satisfying. If I am a researcher with my a few months of research, if I could improve the quality of life for such a large section of society, what can be more satisfying than that? It will, I can tell you, any day more satisfying than writing a paper in any journal or anything. At least for me, seeing their lives improve because of my intervention, I would any day find it very satisfying. There are many people who believe so, but I think that platform is missing right now in the country. So these things need to be scaled up.
Right. Professor Rao, I interacted with many industry people who are in the range from 1 crore to 10 crore of their turnover. There are many industry heads, sir, who say that, yes, we have a problems and we'll be very happy if somebody resolve over this problem. On the other hand, sir, when I interact with the researchers and professors of premium institute like IITs, they have extraordinary skill to solve those problems. But because we professors do not outreach to these industry people, or maybe these people do not come to the professors, that gap remains. And sir, this gap is not filled. That is not there. On the other hand, need of the industry, if it is not incorporated into research, patentable research cannot be done. So unless until it is the requirement for industry and we make the research, then a patent will be more commercially viable. So one of the problem of industries which they tell is that whenever we give some kind of project to the industry or academia, then the time taken to resolve that problem is very large. On the other hand, sir, researchers or academicians, they say that unless until we put effort into and time-bound activity is given to us, it is not feasible. So that is the main clash, professor. Like industry wants within a time and academician want more time because research cannot be time-bound. So what is your take on that, sir?
I think it is possible. I mean, but there are multiple avenues to take up different types of problems. For example, when industry comes to me with a problem which I can solve in 3 months, I don't take it as a research project. I will evaluate how much time will it take for me to solve the problem. I can do it as a consultancy project.
Right.
And there are lots of consultancy projects where you provide a quick turnaround, a quick
right.
solution to a problem. But sometimes these problems require a lot of study, a deep study. And our major resource in IITs at the end of the day are masters and PhD students. They are the ones, and sometimes BTech students, but they will not be able to spend so much of time on a research project, in addition to their BTech curriculum. But the masters and PhD students have dedicated 1 year for the master's student, and PhD students anyway spend time on solving the problem. So very often what happens is the problem solution is synchronized with the MTech projects or the PhD projects.
Right.
So therefore, it runs throughout the duration of those students' thesis. So sometimes it might not be acceptable to the industry in terms of timeline, but where a quick solution is possible, I think we all do that as consultancy projects. IIT Delhi every year does about 30 to 40 crores of consultancy. Right. These are all short-term projects where the faculty member uses some resources and delivers a solution in a matter of months. So almost 40, 50 crore of consultancy work happens at IIT Delhi every year. So I think there are avenues available. There are issues. I'm aware of some of these concerns, but there are also, instances where the solution was provided in a short enough time. There are also those positive stories, and all kinds of things happen.
Okay. Professor Rao, this present day government came to the par a couple of years back and started flagship program Make in India. And recently the program is Atmanirbhar Bharat, Self-Reliant India. I want to ask you, sir, that what is the synchronization of premium institutes like IITs in taking these kind of flagship programs of government forward, like Make in India or Atmanirbhar Bharat?
There are many things. In fact, one of the things this government also started was Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, right, UBA program. Right. The UBA program was a very flagship program. The idea is to connect higher educational institutions with the local problems, right, with the problems at the grassroots level. At Unnat Bharat Abhiyan, now about 5,000 institutions are involved, and there are lots of things happening, I am told. And I also, I'm aware of a lot of that work which is happening under the UBA. That is one mode. Atmanirbhar Bharat, again, under that, what are the kinds of issues that we can look at? We have created we are creating these centers of excellence at IIT Delhi to address some of these problems, which are faced in the society. And again, as part of those centers of excellence, the goal is to provide solutions to the problems and provide technologies so that you become, self-reliant over a period of time. To me, Atmanirbharta comes from Atma Vishwas. So yes, you need to be self-confident. And right, our biggest challenge in the country is even where there are solutions available, the people lack confidence. So in the process now, it becomes a little bit more complex to make a Indian solution accepted, as against what is available from elsewhere. So I think people have that mindset that anything foreign is good and anything imported is good, kind of a mindset. And to even at people at higher levels, I have seen having a similar kind of an attitude. That, in my opinion, is a major bottleneck right now. So that Atma Vishwas is missing in our generation, and even at higher levels, when people start looking at imported technology as superior to the indigenous technology, even without verifying, without validating, and without anything, just the impression that anything foreign is good, kind of mentality. I think that mindset needs to change. It will take some more time, but these are good initiatives. In fact, very systematically, if we can identify where such interventions are required, and then address those problems to appropriate technology solutions, I think many sectors will benefit from that. Whether it is bio sector or any sector that you name, will eventually benefit from all of that. I think we just look at what are we importing. Can we find an indigenous solution to those problems? For example, recently some 50 apps were banned by Government of India. Many of those apps were what? Some scanning app, and those apps were all like downloaded some 100 million times and all of that. And once those apps were banned, I told some of the students here, why don't you guys develop something which is an alternative for that? Within a matter of weeks, I can tell you they came forward with apps which are exactly similar or even better than what are available elsewhere. I think that is all what was needed. But to these kids, nobody told them to deliver anything like that. These apps were available from whatever sources they were. Everybody was using them, happy, and those guys also were happy because they were making big business out of it.
That's true.
But once the need came, it took a matter of weeks to months for us to replace those apps with indigenous apps. I think that is the vision. That is the top-down kind of an approach. If we carefully plan, identify those sectors where we need indigenous solutions, the talent is there. I think the biggest challenge in India, whether it is academia or youth or anybody, is I think finding the right kind of a problem. The processes are not in place for us to connect with the real problem or the right kind of a problem. And sometimes where it is by luck you find a good problem, you develop a solution. But very often people who are capable of delivering solutions are not even aware of the problem. And that is a big issue, because show me one funding agency in this country where the agency gives you a problem and also gives you funds to solve. There is no agency. And you write a proposal, go to an agency and get funds. But that is your proposal. You have identified a problem, you have assumed a problem and gone there for funding. But no agency comes forward and says, I want you to solve this problem, and then here is the money. That kind of agencies are very few and far in between, and that is what is causing the problem. Because we have not connected problems with the researchers so far. We have connected funds with the researchers. There are many schemes, but problems with the researchers, we haven't connected them to any mechanism right now. So I think even in the national education policy, the NRF, which they are trying to create, is a good step in the direction. NRF, for example, if you ask me what should NRF do, NRF should take money from ministries. Ministries should fund NRF. NRF money should not come from finance ministry. NRF money should come from the ministries. They pull in the resources in the NRF along with the problems. Now, if the building ministry, road ministry comes and says, this is the problem I want the community to solve. Here is my money, and I want to fund projects to solve these problems. Just imagine, every year, so many such problems of people working on them and solving them. I think that is what that needs to happen. Otherwise, another agency which gets money from finance ministry distributes the money to faculty members based on the proposals they go with. I don't think that is going to. I think the top-down thing is very important for us to make a mark now in that space.
Right, sir. Professor Rao, IIT Delhi has a techno park in Sonipat. Can you please explain, sir, what is the logic and relevance of creation of such techno park in Sonipat, which is 65-70 kilometers from Delhi?
We have, in fact, two techno parks. One is in Sonipat, which is operational right now. And so we are developing it as a residential incubator or a tech park. In fact, the PhD incubator program,
Yeah,
where we
which you
are
mentioned.
giving accommodation to people with deep tech ideas, is actually running out of Sonipat. And
Okay,
because there is accommodation available on the
right.
main campus, finding accommodation space is always
Difficult.
tough. But the tech parks are a great idea. In fact, IIT Madras has done
Yes,
that very well. And
right,
that is a place where industries go and
right, sir.
establish their R&D labs, and then these industries, their R&D labs now interact with the faculty and students on the campus to work on and engage faculty and students to do their research. In
Right,
the
sir.
process, a lot of funding happens to the
Right, sir.
faculty and students, and for any industry R&D to continue in the tech park, they have to necessarily interact with the faculty and students. The day they say, we are here, but we don't want to interact with anybody, then they cannot continue in the tech park. So in the
Right, sir.
process, if you imagine 200 industry R&D labs established on the campus in the tech park, interacting with faculty and students closely, I think that will be a game changer for any institution. IIT Madras, if you
Has
look
done
at
marvelous.
their numbers, all that, I think that is one thing
They've,
which they have done better than any other institution. But
that's
IIT Delhi now, we will actually have 3 tech parks. One is in Sonipat, which is fully operational. The one on the main campus, Hauskas campus, will be open to public in the month of March. In March,
okay.
we're already, the entire tech park is full. The building is not even complete, but all space is already sold out. I think that's a kind of a demand we are seeing for the space in the tech park. We're also going to build one more in our extension campus in Jajjar. So
Right, sir.
IIT Delhi will have 3 major tech parks in the very near future.
Right, sir. Professor Rao, any institute of eminence has a main challenge, that is to attract the best brain for faculty positions. Any big institutes like MIT, Stanford keep on finding the best brains all over the globe, world as a faculty position. What IIT Delhi is doing for that, sir, to attract the best
We
brain as
do
faculty?
we do many things. In fact, we, at least after I joined, every year in the summer, this year we could not do. So we do a road show in the
Okay,
US. So
okay,
I, along with my team, deans and a few faculty members, we visit all the top campuses all over the world where good quality research is happening, and then we showcase the work that we do to them. And through that process, we try to encourage some of the top quality students to apply and come back and serve as a faculty members. That is one thing we do. And then a lot of letters are written to top research to the professors all over the world, encouraging them to recommend their students. That's also another thing. And we have regular advertisements. In fact, our
yeah,
processes are all very well streamlined. Everybody who is looking for a faculty position in an IIT knows the process now. You just need to go to the website. There is a
apply.
rolling advertisement. You can apply anytime. And then within a time period, within a specified time, all decisions are taken. So
Yeah,
as a result, at IIT Delhi, we do it in 2 cycles. Every department, every center conducts these faculty selection committee meetings twice a year. So every 6 months, we close all the applications that we have received. So I think the process is all streamlined, and we are recruiting enough people. But our biggest challenge is IITs have always, remained inward looking. So to serve as a faculty member in an IIT, until now the requirement was you have to be an Indian or an Indian origin person. So
okay,
you cannot, a foreigner cannot apply to
understand.
these
IIT
jobs.
system.
But that is one of the challenges, because I think the best from all over the world should teach our students.
That's
So
true.
it should not be restricted to one nationality or anything, because we should be, if there are good people, well, whatever nationality they
Yes,
belong to, and if they want to come and teach our students, we should encourage that. I
basically.
think, but somehow the government mindset that government jobs are only for Indians, kind of a thing. So that
Okay,
was stopping us from recruiting any non-Indian origin person.
okay.
But
Mhm.
now those rules are relaxed. So now we can recruit even any person of any nationality as
Okay,
faculty. There are still some restrictions, but that has changed now. So we are
okay,
now beginning to look out for talent from all over the world. When we go these days, we tell them, nationality, no bar. Anybody can apply. The only thing is you have to meet a certain criteria, certain quality for you to come and teach here. So now we are
okay,
trying to open up the faculty positions, and which is
okay.
very important in my.
Okay, okay. Professor Rao, I'll not take much time now, sir, but my last couple of questions are related to recent epidemic COVID situation. Related to that, my first question is, presently we are seeing the online semester. My question to you, Professor, is that will this online semester have some effect on the learning and career of the students which presently are studying?
It is, I think it's a compromise. I wouldn't say that, it hasn't affected anything, because, learning happens in an IIT kind of a system or in any system, particularly in engineering, through three ways. One is the classroom instruction. So that is anyway, we have moved it to online. But the second type of learning that happens is in the laboratories. Every course is associated with a laboratory. You learn by going to the lab and doing things with your hand. That is completely closed now. There is nothing like a laboratory right now. And the third kind of a learning is peer learning.
Right.
In a class, you discuss problems, you find solutions. I think that peer learning in IITs is one of the very major aspects, because you put all these brightest students in one class, they learn from each other. That is also completely missing. So out of the three ways one can learn, I think two are disabled now. Only one is enabled. Even that one thing which is enabled, we are like, online 1.0. The technologies are all are so, inappropriate right now for doing anything in an online way. So I think, there are challenges, and using such primitive kind of online processes, trying to impart high quality education, nobody is happy. I can tell you, neither the students nor the faculty members, but you have no choice. If you don't do that, then how long can you postpone? In IIT Delhi, we thought we will postpone semester and we will only do it when we all reassemble. But, it doesn't work that way, because our academic calendars are synchronized with many things in the world. I think you cannot say that I will not conduct any exams, I will not hold any classes because it's not effective, and then wait until everything gets over. But we don't even know when this thing will get over. So as a result, we had to, take recourse to some of these means, but it's not a very happy situation. I think in some cases, people are okay. Management education, you can deliver it online. But an electrical engineering kind of a course with an associated laboratory and all that,
how can that?
Not the same. Therefore, some departments are happy. They don't really find it as a major problem, though they are missing out on the learning on the campus. But some departments are completely disillusioned with the whole thing. But they have no choice. We are also getting better. I would say that compared to what it was 4 months ago, 5 months ago, the people have become now more used to this, and people have become more effective in online delivery. And people also know now what is that you need to do differently as compared to in-person kind of a teaching in a classroom. So I think, we're all learning, but I think it's never going to be the same as a regular, particularly for engineering curriculum.
Professor, can we expect next semester offline, or if anything you want to comment on that? Will the next semester be delayed, or will it be offline or online? Anything on that?
We don't know. I think this year, I don't think anything will happen. Anything will change. So I'm hoping that from January 1st, we can start the classes. If things look better, this is only October, another 2 months. If there is no more peak, if there no peaks occur in the infection rates, and if things are under control, I'm hoping in January we can restart the semester in the physical mode, but only time will tell. These are all things which are.
Is it also affecting, sir, the intake of the students somehow, like in the courses, like research courses for MS, PhD and all?
IITs, we don't have that problem. I mean, there are always, for every one seat, there are 1,000 people wanting to, get into. So we don't see that problem in IITs, but I'm sure that must be the problem in some other institutions. But in IITs, we have enough demand for the positions.
Right. Professor, my last question is, like any student who aspires to be in premium institute like IITs, they have as of now a couple of options in India, starting from IIT Bangalore to IIT Bombay, IIT Madras and all. So why a student who aspires to be in higher education should choose IIT Delhi?
IIT Delhi has its own culture. In fact, I can tell you the academic rigor in IIT Delhi is very high. It's everybody here takes academics very serious. That is one very important reason. And the second important reason is the entrepreneurship culture that exists on the campus. Just look at the startups that have come out of IIT Delhi, compare it with any other institution in the country. IIT Delhi is way above when it comes to entrepreneurship kind of activities. That ecosystem exists. It might be because we are in Delhi, and because we are connected with all these government agencies very closely. So therefore, the problems flow naturally into the system, and those connections will help identifying a right problem. But on the campus, like I said, every second student wants to become an entrepreneur. I think that sort of a culture you can't find in any other kind of an institution. And the interdisciplinary research now is happening more and more. Facilities. In fact, IIT Delhi, at least I have, in my time alone, I have spent about 400 crores in establishing, state-of-art research facilities. I think that kind of availability and access to such kind of high-end research, coupled with the entrepreneurship space, I think, I think IIT Delhi is doing well. I have nothing negative to say about that.
Okay. Now, sir, I have come to an end of this entire interaction, and I'm really thankful to you, sir, for answering all the questions very well. And I'm very sure the moment this interaction is published, it will help thousands of the students over there. Thanks a lot, Professor Rao, for your time, and I'm honored to interact with you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Pleasure.
Thank you, sir.